Hello YouTubers, my name is Attila Mate from Blue Sky Photography, and today we are out of my studio again. I didn't have time to go to my little studio, so I will make this video just in my home, and I would like to talk to you about a great news about the Panasonic G9. Now this is a new camera, brand new camera that Panasonic brings on the market, and it will be available in the United States. It's already available, but in Ireland, where I am based, it will be available from January 2018. So before somebody will comment that, oh, he doesn't even have the camera in his hand, I will put the email up here so you can see that they told me that it's not available until 2018 January, so I couldn't have the camera in my hand. But anyway, in my opinion, that doesn't really matter when you want to talk about some facts and some important things, Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this camera. In my opinion, I don't know if you've seen the video about the Panasonic GH5, what I did. And if you didn't see, I would suggest to go back and to watch that video, because that video is a great well, I would say better, this video is a great follow-up video for that one. And I tell you why. Because in that video I said that Panasonic will be shockingly good in camera manufacturing. That's my opinion anyway. I think that they are very, very decided to stay on the market for a long time, and they do serious hard work in this matter, and they want to stay on the market. So the Panasonic GH5 is the best video camera which you can get for that price range, 2,000 euro. You cannot get better video camera than the Panasonic GH5. And this will be, the Panasonic G9 will be the best complementary camera for the GH5. Or if you will be more in photography and less in video, then this camera will be for you. And I tell you something, when I was purchasing my mirrorless camera after I left Sony, I wanted a mirrorless system to be able to travel light when I'm going somewhere. So I was thinking a lot, and I was hesitating a lot between Panasonic and Olympus. Which one should I take? Which one should I buy? I tell you honestly, I didn't buy Panasonic or Olympus. I bought Fujifilm at the end of the day. But I didn't buy Panasonic or Olympus because of the sensor size. Because I like portrait photography, and portrait photography needs shallow depth of field. And the smaller is the sensor, it's more difficult to achieve shallow depth of field. Because APS-C size sensors, you can always balance up with a faster glass, and you can get the same depth of field like on a full frame camera. Obviously, there are some situations where you cannot do that either, but in most of the cases, APS-C size sensor is ideal, for that kind of work. Anyway, let's talk about the G9, because this camera, I think that it will be a game changer in the Micro Four Thirds world. And why do I think that? Because I used to play a lot with the GH5 in the camera store down in Limerick, and I will go down to that camera store again to play with this camera when they will have available. They promised me that they will invite me on the introduction day as well, so I will have the chance to play with the camera. Now, the GH5, the sensor is amazing. It's a 20.9 megapixel sensor. Just a second, I check over here. Oh, 20.3 megapixels, sorry. So it's a 20.3 megapixel live MOS sensor. And it's an amazing sensor, I tell you. I made some photos, I dropped in my computer and I just checked. I couldn't believe, I tell you. If you are more like a general kind of photographer, or wildlife photographer, or sports photographer, or landscape photographer even, this sensor is excellent for you, I tell you. And if you don't want to invest heavy thousands of euros to buy a full frame camera and lenses, this system is excellent. And until now, Olympus had the advantage over the Panasonic in photography, I mean photography-wise, Olympus had the advantage that Olympus cameras, they have this high-resolution photo mode, and they had great image stabilization. Now, this starts to fade away, and I tell you why. Because Panasonic introduced in this camera the high-resolution photo mode. That's the first thing they introduced, and I have to tell you that this is a good move from Panasonic that they did this, because this way a lot of people who would choose Olympus for that, they will have a better package with the Panasonic, because Olympus has the high resolution photo mode and has a lot of advantages, you know, in photography, but in video side they are kind of crippling a little bit. You cannot compare Olympus video with Panasonic video. Let's be straight, you know, that's not comparable. So until now it was like Olympus was better in photo, crippling in video, and Panasonic was better in video, kind of crippling in photo. It was okay in photo as well, you know, but it wasn't that good like Olympus. But with this camera, that is gone, because this camera will be more like photo-oriented camera, and but still have excellent video capabilities, and that's the beauty of this camera. Now, I will chimp down a little bit sometimes on my pages, because I printed out, you know, I don't like to go through all the specifications. What I want to do is I would like to highlight the most important things in this camera, which in my opinion are very important if you are doing photography or videography. And first of this most important thing is that this camera has the same system like the Panasonic GH5. I mean, dual SD card slot with the same system that records video and photo on both SD cards. Now, I will have to try this when I will be in the camera shop in Limerick. I will try this, but after I understood and how I saw, you know, in the website, it does the same like the Panasonic GH5, because Panasonic GH5 was the first camera who did that. The Panasonic GH5 is the first camera until now who recorded video on both SD cards, because every camera which has dual SD card slot, they record only the photos. The video records only on one SD card, photos on both. Panasonic was the first manufacturer who introduced this. Now, this is the second camera who does that. And that, in my opinion, for videographers, it is very, very important. Because if you are on a wedding and you do wedding video, and if you are a little bit afraid or concerned that your card might be corrupted, you have always a second card. You have a backup card. So that's excellent, in my opinion. Now, image stabilization. We all know that Panasonic had some image stabilization issues with the G85. But we also know that they were very, very quick to resolve it. So when they noticed the issue, immediately they jumped on it, they resolved it, they released a firmware update, job done, problem is gone, that's it, problem solved. And after that, I never heard, in the GH5, I've never heard any issue with the image stabilization. I tried the GH5's image stabilization, and it was pure joy to use it, I tell you. It's unbelievably good. Now, this camera promises, again, a sensor shift five-way image stabilization. And I hope that it will be the same good as at the GH5. I think it will be the same good. Now, video-wise, guys, I don't want to talk too much about it. This camera does 4K video on 24 frames, 30 frames, 29.97 frames, 48 frames, and 59.97 frames, which is basically 60 frames a second. And it does full HD video in 30 frames, 60 frames, and 180 frames per second in MP4 format. And it does 30 frames, 60 frames in AVCHD format, and 60 frames in AVCHD again. I don't know why they write double anyway. So it's the most important, if you are a videographer, you will want the 4K video. Now, this camera does the 4K video, and it doesn't do the 16:9, the cinematic 4K. It doesn't do the cinematic 4K. It does the Ultra HD, which is 3840 pixels by 2160 pixels. But still, that is done in 60 frames a second, which is very, very good for kind of slow motion, you know. You can slow down that. That's great. That's good. It's not as GH5, like I said, because GH5 is better in this manner. But anyway, this is not the same camera. GH5 is more like a video-oriented camera. If you want more video, obviously you have to go towards that direction. But the 4K video in this camera, it will be excellent. I can guarantee you that. I use Panasonic cameras. Even now, my Panasonic FZ2000 is recording me. And you can see on my channel, the video quality is just brilliant. Now, autofocus. Focus type, focus mode, you know, the focus type is the DFD system, Panasonic's contrast detection system. Okay, about this, what I have to say, in photo, I don't get any issue. I don't complain at all. Even when I was focusing with my FZ2000 on my son's rugby matches, you know, the focus system is just brilliant. I don't know, I don't get any issue with it. I was trying the GH5's focus system, and that is, again, is unbelievably good and fast, snappy. It's not a problem. Again, if we are talking about video, because it is a contrast detection-based system, it has this small little, I call it refocusing. I don't know how they say. Probably there is a word for this. I don't know. I made up this word. I don't know. I call it refocusing, because what the camera does sometimes is just like it's losing the focus and get it back very quickly. Now, this is Nikon problem, and I tell you, Nikon is very, very bad in it. That's why I just simply can't use any Nikon DSLR for video. If you are behind the camera, everything is fine because you focus manually. But if you want to focus automatically, that's not going to happen with Nikon. Now, Panasonic, on the other hand, they resolve. In the meantime, my camera shut down because I didn't notice that the battery is dying. So that's why I was suddenly... Okay, so I was talking about the autofocus. And I have to tell you that this contrast detection, it's, like I said, Panasonic resolved the issue with the refocusing in such a way that you can't really see that. It's happening, it is there. If you look closely, you will see sometimes it's happening, but it's not bad at all. I mean, it's completely usable. It's not as good as contrast and phase detection systems like Canon system or Sony system. Although I don't use Sony cameras, and I'm not a big fan of Sony cameras, but I admit, like I say, I'm very just. Because if I don't like something, that doesn't matter that I don't admit if it's good in something. And if you want great autofocusing, Sony is one of the best. Canon and Sony, these two are autofocus-wise the best. And also transition, focus transition, you know, Sony and Canon, they are very, very good in it. So, focus-wise, you don't really see this issue, but it is in there. Now, this is a contrast detection-based system with 225 autofocus points. It's kind of basically the same system what Panasonic GH5 has, and I guarantee you that that system is excellent. I was trying continuous focus tracking, everything what you want, and it was good. It is good for sports photography, for wildlife photography. It is good. And this camera, especially for wildlife photography and sports photography, it will give you some frame rates, you know, that you will blow your mind. It will blow your mind. First of all, you know, the shutter speed. It's also electronic shutter and mechanical shutter. The mechanical shutter is until 1/8,000th of a second. Again, this is on some cameras. I complain that mechanical shutter is very important to be until 1/8,000th of a second. Some people say they don't agree with it and it's not really important. I say it is very important. Well, this camera has until 1/8,000th of a second mechanical shutter. It has electronic shutter until 1/32,000th of a second. Now, electronic shutter. First of all, let's clear this. If you want to use flash, you cannot use electronic shutter. So if you use electronic shutter on your camera, forget about flashes. Okay, let's move forward a little bit. If we are talking about the frame rate, now here it comes what is very interesting. First of all, 9 frames per second at 20.3 megapixels. If you are shooting RAW and in full size, 12 frames per second, 20.3 megapixel, and 20 frames per second, 20.3 megapixel, but you have to use electronic shutter for this. You cannot use the mechanical shutter. And up to 60 frames per second at 20.3 megapixel when you use electronic shutter, like I said, and up to 30 frames a second with 18 megapixel, and up to 60 frames a second at 8 megapixel. Oh, this is insane. I mean, 60 frames a second, 30 frames a second. It's, I would say, it's overkill. I mean, for any kind of photography, I would say even 20 frames a second, it's overkill. But anyway, it's in there, so if you want, you can use it. I was shooting wildlife and some sports, and I used about 7-8 frames a second. Now, I don't say that 12 frames or even 20 frames a second for sports or for wildlife, it's not good. It is good, but 60 frames a second, I think it's a little bit overkill. If we talk about flashes, flash sync speed, the flash sync speed is 1/250th of a second. Now, 1/250th of a second is, I would say, it's necessary. I think, in my opinion, that if you use manual flashes, why it's good 1/250th of a second? Because you can go until 1/320th of a second, in some cases 1/400th of a second with the manual flash, and you are still okay. If you have your flash sync speed at 1/60th of a second, it will be more difficult to go up to 1/320th of a second. And you can take that as a fact, because I shoot mostly manual flash, and I tried several times, and that was the reason I hated Sony cameras, the A7R and the A6000, and all. They had 1/60th of a second, you know, flash sync speed, and I hated it. Nikon D7200 had 1/250th of a second, and I loved it. It's great. If you shoot manual flash, it is good. So that's a good point, I'd say. Now, let's move forward. Obviously, if we speak about battery life, Panasonic is good. GH5 is great in battery, you know. Even my FZ2000, it's great in battery. I don't complain at all. It's much better like Sony cameras, so there is no point to complain. I would say that these are the most important aspects when we are talking about this camera. I think that the ISO performance of this camera, it will not be like an APS-C or a full frame camera. You cannot expect that, because that is a full frame camera or an APS-C size sensor, and obviously the ISO performance will be better. But in the same time, the Micro Four Thirds sensors, they are excellent, and you can add light anytime. So don't forget that I shoot some photos with the 1-inch sensor, which is my Panasonic FZ2000, and I got great results with flash. So if you can add light, the ISO performance, it doesn't really matter. If you are in a situation where you cannot add light, but you can use a tripod, you are in the same story. So if you work only in dim environment and you cannot use flash or cannot add light or something, you have to buy a different camera. This is not the strong point of this camera. But on the other hand, it is a very fast autofocus camera with great frame rates. I mean, if you look at the frame rates, you know, like it's 60 frames a second, 30 frames a second, and even in photography, you know, 20 frames a second, you know, it's in RAW. It's like unbelievably good, I tell you. Now, guys, I hope that you like this video. If you like it, please like and subscribe and share my videos. If you want to add something to this video, feel free and leave a comment down below, and let's discuss it in a professional manner. I wait very much to go down to Limerick and to put my hand on the camera and to try it out. But I can guarantee you that it will be a great camera, an excellent camera. And I have to tell you that this camera, it will be one of the best in Panasonic world, and it will change Panasonic's history and Panasonic's position on the market, I suppose, in my opinion. So I hope that you like this video. If you like it, please like and subscribe and share my videos. And other than that, I wish you a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.